Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, a show that is always going after the issues and is never really mean. In fact, what we're really trying to do is just express ourselves. And speaking of express, like an express train chugging down the track all the way from Saanich is the Croatian sensation, my partner in crime, John Juricic. John, how you doing?
Here I am, Robin. Ooh, man, I can't. You're right. We set up this show to chat about stuff. Little did we know that there would be too much stuff to chat about.
Well, we'll try to work it out. We'll try to work it out, John. We'll try to work it out. We can't skirt past the big one, the elephant in the room story, the two Michaels, and the behavior of the Chinese. I don't think there's a Canadian alive who isn't furious about the situation.
Well, there's a double-edged sword to this. You're right. An extraordinary frustration that we were played, that we were manipulated by Donald Trump. Okay? Everyone feels that way. It's like, come on, do we have to wait for the president of the U.S. to make a decision before we can get our citizens out of something? That's the frustration. At the same time, there's a real relief that these guys are back. Something happened. Cannot believe the insane excuses that the Chinese government has used to justify letting these guys go. They were sick. Oh my God. However, there's certainly another, as you mentioned, another gorilla in the room. And we've paid the price. And Canadians are now, after they get over the fact that our two Michaels are home, that they've kissed the concrete, that we've had those W5 and CBC interviews. What are we going to do now about the Chinese? That's an unanswered question.
It's a helpless kind of feeling, John. And, I'm really upset that our number one trading partner, that's the United States, and that was, as we've already discussed, under Donald Trump, they said, we're going to put you in a situation where you have to hold a senior executive from Huawei in Vancouver in a mansion. And that person is Chinese, and China is our number two trading partner. They're having a trade war. We're stuck in the middle. In retaliation, the Chinese hold two Canadians captive for over 1,000 days. We can't do a single thing about it. Finally, the Americans cut a deal with Huawei. She's released. Magically, our Canadians are released. And the Chinese are saying to us now, well, China is saying that Canada has to learn a lesson from this. Well, so yeah, all right, I accept that. We've got to learn a lesson. The lesson is we've got to be very careful how we deal in the future with the Chinese. I don't think you can trust this Chinese government. It's not a government that rules by normal laws that most nations can agree on. It's a totalitarian dictatorship, and it's a heavy-duty situation that I don't think Canadians commonly are equipped for. So, you can't buy friendship, China. We'll sell you our raw resources. But how can we trust you in the future? Hostage taking is not the way to go. Bully tactics is not the way to go. Shame on President Xi. This is beyond the pale.
Yet again, I'm overwhelmed with how articulate and bang on you are with your opinions. And we've chatted with lots of our friends locally who are of a Chinese culture, Chinese descent, and they feel the same way as You've just articulated. And they're very worried about their families in Hong Kong, potentially Taiwan, how Taiwan is being treated. This issue affects everyone. And Vancouver Island and BC, we are not immune from these big time decisions.
Yeah, John, it's a terrible story. We could just talk about this for the whole show, but we've got other things to cover, like, the anti-COVID protesters, for example. And this whole COVID dispute keeps marching on. We even have Canuck hockey players refusing to report to camp because they don't want to get vaccinated. It's an ongoing issue. And, we have in Quebec, once again, Quebec leading the way, saying that they are going to change the playing field. They are going to make it against the law to picket hospitals and schools. And now your British Columbia is looking to do the same thing. It sounds to me like that's the right move, John.
Robin, it's not fair to personalize this, although how can I not? I have a grandchild in grade 2. And this one hits home. This one hurts. I'm scared daily that these kids are going to get sick. Kids that I know. Protesters, we've lost lives in many wars, ensuring that protesters have a right to protest.
Right.
But they don't have a right to disrupt other folks, teachers, civil
put other people at risk.
Hospital workers. Correct. They don't have a right, because of that opinion, to put other people at risk. They need to get out of the schools. They need to get out of the hospitals. And we need to try to keep these places as safe as possible, because all of us have a responsibility to keep our society as healthy as possible.
So we're basically on the same song sheet on these important issues, as we are on many, John. And we're going to now talk to a guest who's another commentator in the city, Janice Williams, who also has, I think, some fairly strongly held views on certain issues. She tends to come to it from a conservative vantage point, or it has over the last while, if you can believe her various blogs and tweets, which we find quite entertaining. She's an economist, a former civil servant, a business owner, and she comments on civic, provincial, and federal matters. And we're going to ask her a lot about a lot of things, including whether she's going to run for office in Victoria. So let's zoom Janice Williams in. And now joining us in the Rumble Room is Janice Williams. And from a couple of people who consider themselves online commentators, to have another online commentator on the show is just great. Welcome, Janice.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
Now, we're going to get into lots of different topics because you're interested in civic, provincial, and federal. But I thought we'd start on the mean streets of Victoria. It's not funny. We just had another police officer struck down doing his duty on Pandora by somebody who'd stolen a car. There's been lots of police injuries over the last few weeks. There's a lot of violence downtown. People are really worried about it. The police are totally upset. I mean, they're arresting people. It's a swinging door through the courts. It's catch and release. Janice, as somebody who I know follows this stuff very closely, do you see any obvious solution?
I think the solution is complex. I think that it's not an instant thing, but it's cultural, and that it requires all three levels of government to kind of work together and to really identify the key issues here. Some of it's a mental health issue where we've got people who aren't able to obey the law for a variety of mental health reasons, but meanwhile we don't have the facilities to put them in, and we really do need a facility that can contain people in respectful ways. That it's a healthcare issue, and I think many are frustrated with the open air asylum that's going on.
Everybody's talking about that, Janice. I mean, I've heard this for a long time from a lot of people. Somebody has to get a hold of this, don't they? Who's going to take leadership? I'm not seeing anybody stepping up and saying, okay, enough is enough. Is it time for the city to lead on this? Should the province? I mean, somebody has to grab this and then bring everybody in, right?
I think at the federal level, we saw Aaron O'Toole put it in his platform that he was going to support more residential mental health facilities and more addictions and treatment beds. Now that generally got glossed over and washed out for whatever reason, maybe because he had the disadvantage of running under a conservative banner. But I was really hopeful that, this isn't a platform at the federal level, and I think the province is really rather constrained budget-wise. They're responsible for managing the health budget and everything else, but that envelope's already pushed to its limit. And so I kind of think the feds need to step up and set a national standard and to fund getting it going. working with the province to identify, okay, where are these facilities going to be located? How are they going to be staffed? Under what conditions is someone going to be sent there? And so there's a bit of a relationship between the province and the feds there that needs to happen.
So first of all, exciting to have you on the show. First time I've met you, I've read you on Twitter, and very impressed with your commentary, very articulate, and you bring some common sense that seems to be sadly lacking across political commentary. We certainly need people like you. Victoria Council needs people like you. But here's something that's I think particularly concerning for many of us. COVID is clearly breaking out amongst the homeless population. And there's talk of migrating the community back to Beacon Hill Park. Oh my blank. So should we be worried? Your thoughts?
I think we should be worried. I think we've seen that policy fail time and time again. I don't think it's the right approach for a variety of reasons. The last time what we saw was quite a bit of crime and public disorder around those facilities because they weren't governed or managed. They were kind of a bit of a free-for-all. And a lot of the neighbors really suffered as a result of that. And it really was discomforting because when it comes to Beacon Hill Park, there's a trust that governs its use. And if we were going to be a community that obeys laws, we should expect our city to obey the covenants and the laws that apply to it. And with respect to Beacon Hill Park in specific, there is a trust that governs how it can or can't be used.
Well, there's a court case on right now, right?
There is, and the Friends of Beacon Hill Park have been spearheading that, and unfortunately, they don't have very deep pockets at all. They're a community group. They aren't taxpayer funded. They don't receive the same funding that some of the poverty advocates receive. And I think they've been really struggling to raise the funds they need to support their fight. I believe they're around 40,000 in fundraising now, according to their GoFundMe. I haven't checked on it recently. And then you've got the city of Victoria, which has this endless pool of tax resources.
Our taxes.
Our taxes.
Right.
And I kind of think the city has ulterior motives to breaking that trust.
The ones that really, I think, need to step in on this, and we're going to switch over maybe to federal politics.
Yeah.
Federal government needs to get more involved because a lot of these folks that are coming to Victoria and living in our tents, maybe they've been here for a year, maybe they've been here for a couple, but they're not from Victoria. There are some, but the majority come from other places. And yet the city of Victoria particularly is carrying the brunt of this. The province has stepped in with some accommodation where they're trying to get people inside. They don't have the programs to support it. I go back to Erin O'Toole, who you brought up as someone who was promising. And, you know, I think that there's people on the business community side who are not unhappy to see somebody from the Conservatives saying, I'm going to try to move the party to the center. We're interested in so-called, progressive conservative politics, and we want to move away from social conservatism. And at the same time, Erin O'Toole was soft, I would suggest, on COVID-19 by saying he wasn't prepared to order all of his candidates to get vaccinated. He was playing to the right of his party. And the same with the gun control issue. I don't think that was well articulated. In the big cities, people are freaked out about people walking around and raining neighborhoods with machine gun fire. It happened in the Danforth. It happened on Yonge Street. It happens fairly regularly in Vancouver, people getting machine gunned all over the place. And I think that it played very badly for O'Toole. If you look at the way the vote came down in Toronto, it was a sea of liberal red. In all the big cities, it tended to not go conservative. Would you agree that the Conservatives have an awful lot of work to do if they really want to be a national party again?
I would absolutely agree with that. And I think where the Conservatives have strength and that they fail to really capitalize on is you can have gun control, and you need gun control. And I think most Canadians support strong gun control. but there's a balance to be had there, because the guns that are being used in these activities are often not legal guns to begin with. They've been smuggled through the border or stolen or whatever else. And really what we need is crime control, and to really, say, if you're using a gun in the commission of a crime, maybe that puts that crime in a different category. Maybe instead of this being armed robbery with a knife versus armed robbery with a gun, maybe we come down hard on the criminals and we respect those who are using guns in responsible ways. There's a lot of Canadians who enjoy hunting and who are responsible hunters and stewards of.
That's still a very small percentage of the population.
It's a very small percentage of the population, but to unfairly put them in the category of, well, you shouldn't be allowed to engage in a sport. There's also gun ranges where people target shoot and the gun stays at the gun range. It doesn't. So that's a business that could be curtailed by saying, okay, we're absolutely banning this. Well,
but you got to have stronger language. I think the Tories spend an awful lot of time babbling around on these things without really explaining themselves, and it allowed the Liberals and the NDP to paint them in a corner, regardless of maybe where they really stood on it.
I think that was really sad, because I think when you look at gun violence and gun violence statistics, great, we've banned all these guns, and has it resulted in an improvement in how many people are finding themselves the victims of gun violence?
So, international scene. There are some, majority say that Ottawa hasn't looked terribly good on a couple of key issues. One being withdrawing our citizens from Afghanistan and Kabul, and now this,
and the people that helped us,
and that we looked weak, with the two Michaels dispute. We're caught in the middle of this trade war between two superpowers. How can we do better? Is at the risk of asking way too complex a question, how can we do better?
Come on, Janice, give us the answer. Tell us the answer. Go ahead.
You really aren't keeping the question small, are you?
No.
Big show. We're big thinkers.
Yeah. Soon we'll get to the meaning of life, Janice. So prepare for that one.
I think there was a massive misstep that was made, and something that really stuck, it left a very bad taste in my mouth, was the comment calling the Taliban brothers. And I was actually relieved to see Miss Yusuf lose her seat. I think in large part as a result of that, because what we've seen since Afghanistan fell, and the timing of that was terrible. Hey, I'm going to call a federal election the same day Afghanistan is falling, and we've got all these people there. I think that should have had a lot more consequence than it did on the federal level. I think we should have been more proactive there a month in advance or whatever else. But over the last 6 years, I think we're kind of losing a bit of our clout and credibility on the international stage in terms of our historical role as peacekeepers, as really being there in a measured way, and kind of bringing that Canadian problem solving to the forefront, where we go, okay, what are the issues? How do we solve this? How do we get from point A to point B in the most effective way?
I have a couple of blockbuster questions for you. One of them is not the meaning of life, but close.
Okay.
And we're gonna now go into the civic politics sort of level. Okay.
Yeah.
First of all, would like to hear what this council has done right or wrong. Okay, that's a big question. So
In Victoria.
in Victoria, so prepare for that. But secondly, and I think to many people, maybe more at this stage forward, more importantly, is what are we going to do about it?
And what are you going to do about it, Janice? Are you going to run for office?
And And, Ben Issett won the majority of votes in Victoria. That base is well entrenched.
Yeah.
Where does a balanced, accountable, common sense, small business orientated business voice like yourself, where does that person, how do they win? And then, of course, to Robin's question, are you going to run?
Easy questions.
There you go. We got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh, wow.
I'm teasing.
Okay, if I raise my hand and I say yes, am I going to be attacked? Because once you become a public figure, everything about you becomes fodder for attack, right?
Not on this show.
Not on this show, but it's taking a risk. And so the instant you definitively say, yes, I'm doing this, okay, all your tweets are screenshot. Okay, oh, look at you, your kids go to private school. Look at your big house, right? And look at how you dress, your hair, your makeup. As a woman, that tends to seem to be more important for some reason. And so there's a bit of hesitation there. But on the same token, when I look at my daughter and I go, okay, if you wanted to do this, I'd want to see my daughter run. Well, how do we get to a place where balanced, reasonable people run if those balanced, reasonable people aren't willing to take the risk? Right. So I'm seriously considering it, and I am not going to commit at this time. But I am going to say that there are a lot of very valid and good reasons for me to do so.
So Janice, even though municipally folks tend to not admit that they're actually part of a group of voters, that they're from a tribe of people that will all support them, or that they're on a slate.
Yeah.
This Victoria City Council has slates that got themselves elected. Jeremy Loveday came out of nowhere, piggybacked Ben Issett's 2-decade-long attempt to get on a council or whatever, and got in. Have you heard of any kind of organized coalition forming that would represent yours and Stephen Andrews' opinions?
I've heard of rumors, and there's been a lot of debate around it. And some of it is a case of, is Victoria tired of slates? Is there going to be a slate backlash? Is being part of a slate in and of itself, this next election, going to be seen as a huge black mark? Okay, here you have a group of people and they're pooling resources, and are they playing fairly? And can I trust them? Or are they just going to sing from the same choir book when it comes to making decisions at that table? Part of the problem we have right now is you can pretty much predict who's going to vote what way based on their slate.
Oh, come on. What a great guest. What a breath of fresh air Janice Williams is. Common sense, articulate, balanced. That's what Canadian political life used to be. Now we're living on these friggin' edges. I sure hope she enters our political arena. Her views need to be heard.
I couldn't agree more, John. And, we need balance on Victoria Council. We've never said we shouldn't have progressive people on council. We can have people that are big with Together Against Poverty, who are big believers in the social justice issues, who maybe even subscribe to political parties that maybe you and I don't. The question isn't that. The question is having a group, a slate, dominating and basically controlling the city. I'm sure our progressive people would be in despair if they thought somehow there was going to be a right-wing group that came out to control the city. We don't call for that either. We want to see balance. We felt when Stephen Andrew won on that by-election, that created balance. I think somebody like Janice Williams would even enhance that further, and that is all we're saying on that. But we're going to take a plunge into something else before we wrap up the show, and the plunge is promoting our show next week, which is a salute to Thanksgiving and giving thanks will be one of our great pals. We're bringing him back. We're bringing back, for popular demand, Howie Siegel will be on the show to talk about the things that he's thankful for, both in a business capacity, a personal capacity. Howie is such a great communicator and such a great guy. And we thought, as a Thanksgiving treat, we'd bring Mr. Siegel back to the Rumble Room.
I can't wait. Howie's shows have been one of our most watched Rumble Room interviews.
Well, he watches it over and over again.
That's fantastic. He's so very thankful for the Rumble Room. Oh, that's fantastic. Well, but he certainly doesn't come anywhere near the kind of interest and popularity that you generate. You know, we do a bunch of 1 minute, 1.5 minute editorials that we also post, all of which can be found on our Facebook page, which is now up there, listed up there. And we link to Twitter and also up there. And of course, we have all of these editorials, big shows, Howie Siegel's extraordinary shows, all on our YouTube page, Victoria Rumble Room with John and Robin. And, you know, why do we say this every time? Why do we say share the, because there's a whole bunch of people, close to 65,000 now, and I'm not teasing, that have watched what we do, and they have a lot to say. So we want to make sure that our viewpoints and our viewers that share our opinions or don't contribute by joining these different platforms. So until we meet again, from my Saanich den, I'm John Juricic, and I remain your friend to this day.
And I'm Robin Adair. And remember, please always remember, with great enthusiasm, to rumble on.